program with the idea, hopefully, that you will feel free to jot that question down, answer it. It's very simple. We'll discuss it. The purpose is not to give you a test at all, but that's the way I make it interactive with the bar so that I can assure the bar that you have in fact watched the video. Please send me, by email or phone, preferably by email. It's the easiest. What the question is and the answer, and I will know that you have seen this program. It's pretty much that simple. In addition, just so you know, if you're a paralegal, I will send you certificates for these hours. If you're attorneys, I will turn your time into the state bar for you as well. And I will also send you a certificate for your own personal records with the course number, the name, and that sort of thing. We started in the first hour with the first 4 or 5 steps that are important to make you better at what you do. I should add that the fact that we're taking these steps in a certain order does not really mean that that's the order of importance. It's just the order I wrote them down. It's nothing more than that. Though I do think, now that I can contradict myself, perhaps the best one of all is the first one. That's what most people have said when I've done these live programs, and that is to show up and be on time. If showing up is a great percentage of part of life, then showing up and being on time is so darn important. I didn't say this yesterday, but I remember, if you remember back when President Bush, George Bush, first took office in 2001, he had appointed Colin Powell as his Secretary of State. At the first cabinet meeting, Secretary Powell was just a very few minutes late, and President Bush had the doors to the cabinet room locked to make the point that he needed to show up and he needed to be on time. The President of the United States can do that with Secretary of State Colin Powell, former Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Assistant to the President. Then we can show up on time for programs when I travel out of state, out of town. You can show up when you have to be at work or in court and on time. The second principle that we talked about yesterday, the other day when I taped these, I'm taping them one day at a time, is to take responsibility for yourself. Nobody else is going to do that. Own your own mistakes. Don't anticipate that anyone else is going to own your mistakes. How many times have you seen situations where people try to escape responsibility by making up excuses and telling stories, and they get themselves into a pretzel, so to speak, wrapping around just because they can't admit the mistakes they made. One of the things I want to talk about right here that I did not mention yesterday, I was a lawyer for about 22 years. I practiced law in the Attorney General's office in North Carolina, the United States Attorney's office. I was court appointed to the United States Attorney position for a year and a half. I tried lots of cases. I then went into private practice with Rick Gammon for a short time. Then I was in a solo practice for a year or two, and then I joined a large law firm with offices in Greensboro and Charlotte and Raleigh. So I say all that to give you the idea that I've been and seen almost every aspect of how you can practice law, both with the government and in private practice. lots of times when I've told my story of going to the top and falling down as badly as I did many years ago, so much so that I had to turn in my license to practice law to the state bar. And so much so that the Wake County District Attorney, who was a friend of mine at the time, submitted a bill of indictment to the Wake County Grand Jury, which they acted on and indicted me, and I wound up serving 3.5 months in state prison for wrongful things that I will discuss, such as transferring money from the trust account, the law firm, to another client twice, manipulating funds paid to me rather than to the firms to pay off other clients. I've been asked so many times, why did I do these things? Now, in the third hour, that is to say, when I talk about depression, hope beats depression every time, I will talk about the mental illness of depression. And I was diagnosed with that. And some of my good friends say to me that I should have relied and do rely on the defense of mental illness or depression. Some of my best friends have said, Jim would not have done these things but for depression. And indeed, in 1993, the year that this was all happening to me, now 22 years ago, there were a number of people who wanted me to act that way. And some of my friends, one of my lawyers said to me, Jim, if you rely on a defense of mental illness, of depression, you will go down very hard. Others said, no, you need to make a stand for mental illness and depression and raise it as a defense. I chose not to rely on mental illness and depression. I chose to accept responsibility and own my mistakes for that. That was not easy to do, even though the evidence was overwhelmingly against me. I had left a paper trail, really, a mile long. It took me the better part of 1 year to finally and completely and totally own my mistakes. Oh, I said that I was responsible for everything when I turned in my license to practice law. I wrote the bar a letter saying that. But to finally and completely accept what was happening to me, what I had done to myself, and not to blame anyone else or to whine about it, took me about a year to do. I wasn't an instant person on being good about what I should do. What I want to say is that right now, I've done a great deal of thinking over the last period of time as to why I got into so much trouble. I believe, and I want to say to you as strongly as I know how, that I think my failure and my collapse as an attorney licensed to practice law in good standing in North Carolina and before the United States Supreme Court was due to a failure of moral courage on my part. Due to a failure of moral courage on my part. Those are not easy words for me to say. It came very hard to me to reach that conclusion. But my goal in doing these seminars and programs and taping this program for you is not just to give you CLE credit hours, which of course is what you want and need. But it is also to say something important to you while you are watching or listening to whatever it is I am saying. The inability to own my own mistakes is huge. The inability to own my own mistakes is huge. And I have tried since that time to learn from my past. I am not by any stretch saying that today I do this correctly all the time. But I can tell you one thing, I do it a heck of a lot better than I did it 22 years ago. All I had to have done back then was to have called a client, or met up with a client, spoken to a client, and said, let me tell you what is not going on. Let me tell you the mistake I have made. Let me see if we can fix this. If we can't fix it, we can't fix it. But at least I would tell them the truth and I would own it. That would have made everything so much better for me, so much better for the law firm, so much better for everyone if I had simply done that. But I could not do that because I wanted everybody to think I was perfect. I wanted everybody to think I did everything correctly and well. And to admit mistakes and to own them would be to admit that I had not done as I should have done. That I was not willing to do. And that, I believe, was one of the major causes of my crash, along with doing the wrong stuff in the first place. Those two twin things, which perhaps is a failure in the loss, however temporary, of a moral compass. I don't know whether you have ever faced a situation in your own career or your own life where you have had a hard time admitting mistakes. And the trouble is when we can't admit them, we start to cover stuff up. It is, frankly, in covering stuff up that we get ourselves in so much trouble. I think I said yesterday, if I didn't, I will say it again today, in this particular program, where I have these 10 steps to make you better at what you do than you've been in the past. When I was practicing law, I only did 1.5 of them pretty well. That was to say, I was nice and kind, and I had a sense of humor. The rest of them I didn't do well at all. Well, I'll tell you what I did the worst. I can tell you without any question what I did the worst. And the worst one I did was owning my mistakes. I did not do that. I did not do that. I paid a heavy price for not doing that. Don't you do that. You still have time. You can escape that. You can avoid that. Run from that and embrace the mistakes you made. Be open. Be transparent. Be honest. Be truthful. Now let me talk about truth just a moment. I started this program about 6 weeks ago and have had discussions with lots of lawyers about telling the truth. And you can hear lawyers respond as lawyers, which is okay. Here's what they say. What is absolute truth? Absolute truth may be different to one person from another person. There may be a set of facts or set of circumstances to be interpreted differently. So maybe absolute truth is difficult. And the lawyer saying this asked me, did I believe in absolute truth? I have to tell you that I do.